We work hard as physicians to take care of the health and well-being of our patients. But when it comes to our money, do we have the same condition of care? Probably not. Let's change that together. Welcome to the Financial Freedom for Physicians podcast, where we'll fight and advocate for your financial literacy. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. Thanks for being here. Let's jump into the show. This week's episode is sponsored by CityVest. CityVest has quickly become the most popular and best way for doctors to invest in top-performing real estate private equity funds that are usually reserved for institutional investors. This unique access to investing in these institutional funds is available for the first time ever through CityVest's easy and secure online investment platform. CityVest does the hard work of conducting due diligence and vetting the investments. They even get a third-party due diligence report that is posted on their website. As a result of aggregating a several million-dollar investment amount into their access funds, CityVest gains access to investing in the institutional investment and is able to negotiate better investment terms such as a 12% preferred return. You can check them out at cityvest.com or go to the link in the show notes below. So welcome everybody to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom for Physicians podcast. And I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. And as you know, we talk about 4 different types of freedom: time, financial, location, emotional freedom. And what started out as physician guests and listeners has now expanded into business owners, investors, entrepreneurs, coaches. So hopefully the two can benefit from each other. So today we have a special guest, Mia Moran, and she has a really interesting bio. She's talking about inspiring women as a mentor to help them balance work, family, and their wellness. So she's going to talk about time freedom, emotional freedom. So Mia, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah. I know we connected through Podmatch and we talked backstage, and I know, the 4 pillars are finances, location, time, emotional freedom. So tell us more about yourself and how you got started.
Okay. So the one thing that I have not experienced that I'm assuming some of your audience has, especially in the physician space, is I have definitely always been an entrepreneur. So that definitely, I understand that is builds in some location freedom that I know not everybody feels, but we can talk to that a little bit too. So I definitely have that I don't know that it's an advantage, but I have that experience. But in being an entrepreneur, I haven't always been the same kind of entrepreneur. So I started off actually owning a pretty big design firm, actually, which I grew while having 3 kids who are now teenagers, but at the time they were babies. And so my experience began kind of as really indebted to my business and having this experience where one day I remember looking across my desk, and at the time I had 3 kids under the age of 5. So for anyone listening who has kids, you can imagine that this was somewhat of an intense motherhood moment. And for sure, it was so much easier to be at work than to be at home. I fully had a nanny who was there. I felt very supported in that way. But I remember this day looking at this stack of coffee cups. Your physicians are also going to laugh at this. That was stacked up on my desk from when I had gotten to work that day. So whatever, maybe I got there at 8:30 and it was only 3, and there was 7 of them. And I was like, first of all, how have I gone to Starbucks this many times in one day? And second of all, I was always told that caffeine was supposed to give you energy, and I'm freaking exhausted. So what is going on? And so that just caused this whole, maybe a breakdown. I don't know, but it just caused this whole moment where I was like, oh shoot, I have checked off all my boxes. I married the guy I wanted to marry. We bought a home. We had 3 kids. I built this company. I had all the things. And what I hadn't really seen until I was looking at these coffee cups was that I was miserable. I was not happy. All the things hadn't brought me happiness at all. And I was exhausted. So the miserable part felt like I didn't deserve it. So I sort of put that aside for a minute and I went with the exhausted piece. And the most tangible piece of the exhausted piece was that over the course of being pregnant, nursing, all the things that one does when they have little babies, is that I had gained 65 pounds. Just
Mhm.
I think from the stress and like hormones and all the things. And so I decided that I was going to that needed to be what I focused on, was really my body. And so it was just sort of one thing led to another. And I would say it led to body freedom, which isn't one of your pillars, but it was definitely something I had not experienced before, where I really got healthy. And that shifted my happiness, it shifted my energy. It just shifted what I perceived was possible, because before that moment, literally, I did not know how to cook. Like, I think an egg would have been a challenge. If you told me to go buy kale at the grocery store, I might have cried. Like, I just, that wasn't my thing. And so I really had to learn and commit quickly as somebody who didn't think I had any extra time. So I did that, and I ended up writing a book on health and food and family and how to get healthy. And I'm telling you all this because, one, I think that health was a really important, and why wellness is one of our pillars now. It was a really important piece. But I went out and wrote this book and went on this book tour and met like thousands of women. And I started for some bizarre reason in California, and I live on the East Coast. And I brought my kids with me. I homeschooled them for a year on this book tour. And I just kept like realizing that people in the room knew way more about food than I did. Like, I thought I was going to educate people about green smoothies, and people in California have been having green smoothies like long before I ever knew what one was. And so I was like, what is the problem? Like, what is going on here? And it really ended up that it was time. It was time. Like, no one thought they had the time to make change, and everybody was really craving change. And mostly that was in the form of connection with their kids, healthier lifestyle, um, easier ways to make money, all the different things. But for like everyone I kept talking to, it was like, I just don't have enough time. Like, I certainly don't have enough breathing room to change. So that's sort of how I got to where I am today, where I talk a lot about productivity and how that might look different for today and for women.
That's quite an interesting introduction, because you had so much things you talked about, burnout and stress, and being a women in today's world. We'll start going down the rabbit hole. So one thing is, we hope you don't mind this brief interruption from one of our affiliates. Today's affiliate is studentloanadvice.com. StudentLoanAdvice.com is a company powered by the White Coat Investor that specializes in helping professional students such as doctors, dentists, and other healthcare professionals navigate the complex and oftentimes confusing student loan landscape. They offer a consultation as well as services to help you save money when consolidating and paying back your student loans through their different options. You can go to their website, studentloanadvice.com/FFFP. That's again, studentloanadvice.com/FFFP to find out more, get signed up on their email list, or schedule a call with Andrew Paulson. Now back to our show. You talk about having it all, and
Yeah.
and how specifically can we each have it all, and or whatever having it all means in today's society.
Exactly. And I think that's like the most important piece of that, because I think we really have to define that for ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think especially, I would imagine for everyone who's listening, who's still in medicine, like as women, I just think it's so embedded in like everything, like from magazines to where we came from, to like that we either are good at work or we're good at home. And like, there's this huge divide the second your kids start school that like, you've chosen. And I've had this interesting thing of like, I never actually felt in either camp, because in some sense I had this time freedom always as an entrepreneur. So I didn't really like relate to the people who were like being told when to be at work. Yet I totally didn't relate to the moms who were home either. And so I think that was this like middle way through for me, where I was like, wait, like, why do we have to choose this? And then for everyone, no matter which you choose, whether you're going to like be a good mom or be good at work, which is ridiculous because of course you can do both those things. We so often leave self-care on the plate, and especially for like, I'm assuming that, a lot of maybe your working audience, is part of this sandwich generation. So whether you have kids or you have parents, like I just meet so many women who are actually in the middle, and like, they're not only caring for kids, they're caring for older people. It's like ridiculous what we have to do. And taking care of ourselves just gets put last. And so those are the alls that I'm really referring to.
Uh-huh.
And so I think we just really have to redefine what all that means and what's really important to us. And once you know what's important to you, I really believe time bends. And I know that sounds weird, and it's not like it really bends, but it's like, I never would have imagined that I had time to like change over my food 12 years ago. I never would have imagined that I could go on a book tour for a year. Like, it's just like, you just figure, like the second something feels like it's just for you, everything changes. And when we're really listening to how somebody else thinks it's supposed to be, I think it's much harder to figure out, because then you really are playing Jenga, because it's like, I'm supposed to have this and I'm supposed to have this and I'm supposed to have this. And how does it all go together? And it feels overwhelming just even thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so hard, today's hustle culture, and this in a lot of the narratives we grew up around is all based on a male dominated narrative, and media. You're supposed to have this type of drive this type of car, live in this neighborhood.
Yeah.
All of that, not but what's interesting is you talk about it's sort of like a balance. And how do you it sounds like you balance yourself well. And so what does balance mean to you, and have you always been good at feeling balanced?
Well, not before the coffee cups, but since the coffee cups, I've gotten pretty good at it. And I think that what's really important around balance is just really understanding the season you're in. That's a really important part. So of course there's parts of our careers that are like, they're a little bit more hands-on, at which point we go like out, you can, I don't know if everyone's watching video right now, but my hands are going up. It's like, then you just need the bird's eye view of like, okay, this is like a work time. Like, how am I balancing that out with downtime? What does that look like? And so if you're always thinking about balance, then you're planning. And the other thing about balance is, I think, I don't even know how this happened, but when we're talking work-life balance, we're thinking timeline, a lot of us, like that's the first thing that comes into our head. And the second you're thinking timeline, it's very linear. And so it's like, you want equal chunks, but balance is actually a weight, like it's actually volume. And so if you think of like a huge plastic ball, which is hollow, which is what I'm going to call work for right now. And then you think of this like little gold nugget, like they can balance each other out. So if you just make a plan where you're like, eating well, maybe that's the gold nugget, or you're going to yoga during your lunch break or whatever, like it's very easy to balance out things that feel out of balance. And it doesn't necessarily have to be equal time. And I think that was the biggest aha for me. And I find that when I'm focused on balance, which I've had to do, unfortunately, in like sometimes not great circumstances, like last year, one of my children didn't thrive during COVID. And so it was a lot of attention toward that child, and my business thrived. Like, I just feel like when you're really thinking with the lens of balance, you figure out what it takes to balance the thing out. And it doesn't have to be effort. I think that's the thing. We always think it's more time, more effort. But I think it's just really thinking in advance and thinking as sort of the next version of yourself and what that would look like. Does that answer that question?
Oh yeah. I like that analogy of thinking in terms of time and chunks, and really just focusing on that. And like turning off your email notification, or your cell and all of that. And the other thing is, what is the first thing we should look at when we're feeling overwhelmed? Just what is it? More awareness? Tell us more.
Yeah, so balance, ease, joy, like all those things, they're all feelings, right? And so is overwhelm. So I think that's the first thing, is it's like, oh, like it's just catching that. And like, and obviously there are moments when we're doing a lot of things and it overwhelms our system, but it's like, I'm overwhelmed right now. I don't have to be in a constant state of overwhelm. That's more of a choice, right? So one of the things I love to do is just catch like, oh, like I'm feeling really overwhelmed because I have this stack of, paperwork. I have this stack of patients that I have to write all these reports on or whatever, and so it's like, so, and that's feeling overwhelming, like in this moment. But that doesn't mean we have to be in a constant state of overwhelm around the fact that we always have to do paperwork. And so to me, that sort of starts to shift like the conversation of how I'm feeling about overwhelm, because overwhelm can be, to me, can just be this consistent story of like, it's too much, it's too much, it's too much. So really just like catching ourselves of like, yeah, it is too much right now. And I'm going to balance that out by leaving at 3 or going home and hugging a kid or having a healthy meal or, going to an exercise class or whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I know you talk a lot about finding flow when you're constantly in survival mode, and how pushing less and being way more productive. Yeah, it's really interesting. I know a lot of physicians, especially female physicians, because they have they have their careers, but then they have to juggle their family and all of these responsibilities, so it can be quite daunting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I think so many doctors are burned out just after COVID, and but I'd like to transition into food and wellness, and how does that impact work-life balance?
Yeah. So can I say one thing about the thought before first? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna get to food, I promise,
Mhm.
and how that affects it all. But one thing I was just thinking as you were saying the thing about, just burnout from the pandemic and going home, like that's a really good example of like the weight of things and just some of the things we've been conditioned to do. So I think anyone who has, I would say especially sort of doctors, um, we work such long hours. And so then when you get home, well, first of all, you probably need some time to unwind. But second of all, there's like that immediate thing that like you have to spend all the time with kids or like or connecting with a spouse or whoever's in your life. And that's an example of like the gold versus the plastic. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, you could spend all your free time with your kids, that you're not working, but probably that will lead to overwhelm and burnout really fast. But that to me, that's an example of like, but if I choose to come in, like take care of myself or not even come straight home, but like have a path, like, that maybe that is when I, just breathe deep in the car for 10 minutes or do a meditation or go move my body or whatever it is. And then I walk in and I'm fully present, even if it's just for 10 minutes, that's much more connecting to a kid or a spouse than like 8 hours of you being stressed. So that's an example of like how we can balance it out and it can be a lot less overwhelming. So I just had to say that for anyone
Yeah.
who that serves. Um, so then food. So for me, that was the piece of that journey 12 years ago that I just had to figure out how to really keep in, because when I cleaned up my food, sometimes I describe it as like I went to a therapist for 10 years. Like it increased my happiness and my productivity and my focus in a way that I had no idea that it could do that. And so I think it's really important that we prioritize that and we don't let that slide, because it really can be the foundation to how we show up at work, like how we feel in our bodies, which then affects how we show up to the people we love, which then affects like how much energy we have to do other things. So I just feel like it affects so many things. And I'm kind of laughing to myself thinking that I'm talking to doctors because because I want y'all to share this too.
Yeah.
It was the thing that I'm like, how do we not know this? Like how is this not like common knowledge? But it's not like what we put in our bodies is not common knowledge. And I'll say that what I did 12 years ago was kind of extreme, actually. I decided to go raw vegan for a year. And it did shift what I did. But the two things that I found really affected me a lot were the gluten and the dairy. So I've managed to keep those out all this time. And I just feel good, right? Like, of course, my body does all sorts of strange things because I'm a woman with hormones, but that just keeps this like baseline of like my energy is even, and I feel good. So I just feel like when we start to think about how our health can really support us in our work and how we show up in our family and how we show up in our life, we can really change. So it's freedom. It like literally creates freedom.
Yeah. I've been reading a really interesting book about food and just diet, and it comes down to just macronutrients, the micronutrients, and how it affects your brain chemistry, your body. And you don't really see it, but then you like notice and feel it. So it's quite fascinating, what you put into your body, not only just information or your who you associate with, but then your food. That's very interesting. So,
yeah. And how you move. Yeah. All the different parts. And it's so easy when we get busy to, I guess COVID made it a little bit harder, but it's so easy to go get takeout and like do this thing in passing and not really think about it. And, then summer brings in all these like, gatherings of people, and we hate to say no, but I don't know. The second I really, planned for that and followed through on my plan, like a lot of times what I say about planning, and this helps in any of those 4 pillars, a lot of times what I say about planning is it's just your, past self giving your future self the gift of really being in the present. So it's like when you're planning, I always like to think that it's my future. I try to like really get in alignment with the future me, which would make very different decisions than the current me, right? And the current me, like I want like French fries. Future me is like always healthy and energetic, so she might make a different choice. So I try to channel her to make my plans. And then it's like when I'm in the moment where it's time to follow whatever plan I've made, it's like, oh yeah, like she wants these things. So it's to me, it relates a lot to money, because money, it's so easy to like spend now, but we know that saving, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of parallels there. So food for me, it's just like, how can we make smart choices for our future, which it's not always easy to make those choices in the moment.
It's been a great conversation, and I know all the particularly the female cohort will really resonate with what you're talking about. And how can people get a hold of you, contact you, maybe work with you? Any links or resources would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, so our website is plansimple.com. And we have a free course there actually that's called From Overwhelm to Ease. So it just takes through the process of really understanding both as emotions and then figuring out how to plan your day. And then I also have a podcast called the Plan Simple Podcast. So anyone who listens to that can go, he listens to podcasts, that might be a really good resource. And the way that we work with people is really around planning and productivity. So we work with people to really figure out what they want and to make a plan for it. And then we literally like are very handholdy around making sure that women follow through. Because I think it's one of the places where we've left to our own devices. We haven't been guided. And I think we all need to take personal responsibility for what we want, but we don't necessarily have to do it alone. And women very often do all the things alone.
Yeah. Especially in this day and age, we have so many resources and we have communities, so it's so much easier to get started. So well, thanks so much for coming on to the show, and we'll be looking forward to hearing about your future success.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited that you made it for another episode. You are truly the best. If you've been following the show for a while, you know that my passion is to bring you the education you need to find your path to financial freedom. Please come back week after week for new content, new resources, and great guests. Until then, if you haven't already, please be sure to check out the website, www.drchrislumdphd.com, for more support. I'll see you next week.